Leigh McCloskey, welcome.
Thank you. It is delightful to be here.
And it's a huge honor to have you. I know that we've been going back and forth. It wasn't easy because you're stuck out there in Malibu and the PCH is closed.
Yeah, it's been closed for 4 months now. So I thought coming in here would take hours and hours, and the gods were very kind, and it only took an hour. So I guess it was meant to be.
They were smiling on you.
Yes, exactly.
So I was thinking, how shall I introduce you for the podcast? And I came up with like philosopher, teacher of all things esoterica. What would you say? What would you define yourself as?
There's an old word, a polymath, meaning that many talents in many directions. And it's not a conceit, it's just the way I was made, I guess, because curiosity is sort of my guiding star, and curiosity means that if you're interested in love, you use different tools than you do if you're interested in mechanics. And this has really been the nature of my work. I am a professional actor for years and years and years, which freed me as an artist, as a philosopher, and as a thinker to not worry about the trends in modern art or why I was trying to find a market there. I was doing that as an actor. So what was really quite extraordinary for me was I've lived a double life. I've been able to ask questions about the nature of the soul, about who are we when we dig deep, and also to experience what it's like in the outer world of culture, to experience celebrity and the accolades of people for all the things that we value in society. So it's really an interesting journey to be both rewarded culturally, which gave me an opportunity to go deeply inward, and I've devoted my life to that. But I'm also a family man, so a lot of things.
Well, there are tons of people who have had professional accolades and don't go as deep as you. It's interesting that you would think that the acting helped you take a deeper dive.
Well, acting in the sense that theater, the sense of why are we wired the way we are? Why is life as a play? Why are the characters the way they are? So
Got it.
It was really using what I experienced as an actor and realizing that the tool that gave me of being able to embody and enter another person was also a tool by which I could enter much more deeply into the human psyche. So it became my way in.
So now the toolbox is full and you're working with a multitude of different things.
Yeah.
So before we begin, there is a sacred prayer that you sometimes do. I'm Alpha, I'm Omega. Do you know which?
Yeah.
Maybe start with that? Would you like to do that?
We'll talk about that later, but in the hieroglyph of the human soul, that when we stand in the mirror of self-reflection and unique identity, we raise our hands and we say, I love. And then we lower and I think. And then I am Alpha, Omega, seed, blossom, infant, ancient, female, male. I am Alpha, Omega, seed, blossom. And this gesture allows it to be the rhythm, the cadence, the probability that music is a much deeper truth to the soul. So I love, I think, I am Alpha, Omega, seed, blossom, infant, ancient, female, male. I am Alpha, Omega. And when we say that, we do it with our own voice. This is like the Bhagavad Gita.
It's a mantra, right? You're hearing
important.
your own voice, which is more powerful than hearing that of someone else.
Because your deeper self knows this is true.
Right, and it's a way to connect with your deeper self,
Exactly.
which we rarely do these days. It's very hard.
And this is why theater, this is why ritual, rather than belief, or I have to believe this, or I have to do that. I always say acting teaches you to pretend. And you pretend long enough until you feel it. And then you feel it, and by feeling it, it becomes yours, because you're not trying to do something you think you should be doing, but something that you've discovered by doing, how it feels in you.
So is this the philosophy of acting as if, to some degree?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Because in a great deal of ways, consciousness is quantum. It's saying, give me material to work with. So it's not the what's wrong or what's not there, but the very act of bringing something to it gives it food, and it starts to gestate, and it grows. And this is why a performance becomes something embodied when it is good, rather than something that is simply illustrated. So it's the difference between inner and the optic of something.
Yeah, I think the whole philosophy of all this quantum entanglement. I don't know if you've been reading about the quantum entanglement, and it's really becoming real. Like for those who thought it was woo woo and couldn't really grasp it, I think science is doing a very good job of proving the reality of all things quantum at this point.
And this is where I feel very strongly that what is missing is the creative, the art, the love, meaning that science is doing a very good job of unriddling many of the mysteries, many of the way things are constructed, how they interact. But the key is the human. And this is Hermetic science, not simply science. It's going back to the ancients, which is that the greatest proof of anything is art. Because beauty, meaning, love transcend the ability to grasp or contain. So if your ideas, your theories are what you say they must be beautiful. They must be true. And we don't think philosophically in this culture. We think scientifically. We're interested in going after effect. My work is about cause.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think that's also true that creativity brings you onto the timeline where things actually start to happen and work for you. Absolutely. Like you can be on a timeline where you're resisting or a timeline where you're creating. Yeah. And once you start creating, that flow takes effect and you just ride that wave until it crashes and then another one comes.
And I would even go the other way, is saying that it's not riding the time wave. It's realizing that the time wave is riding you. In other words, that as you, if you think of it from an actor's point of view, that when you begin a role, you don't have any idea of how to play it. You may read it, you have an assumption. But then you begin rehearsal, you begin going into it, and you begin experimenting. And every day you put into it, you discover more. And you're not actually giving a performance until you've gone through the rehearsal, until you've actually allowed yourself to go from a type of I and thou with the character until the character becomes part of your inner being. And this happens when one is able to hold their own consciousness and yet able to feel the dynamics of this other character within them.
The freedom in being that character.
And that's why we look at things like the audience rather than like the actor of consciousness. Because if I say you are in the play, your character is not my character, so I'm not trying to influence or change your character, but I'm seeing between us a conversation that is trying to be bigger than you or I. It's an idea that's exploring itself through us, very much like a playwright saying, I need my actors. But the overall idea of the play is actually larger than any one of them. And this is what we're trying to do with what I'm working on, which I call the theater of the psyche.
So what would you say are some of the bigger things you're thinking about right now? Some of the, if you take it off the personal scope, like terms of what's going on with the planet, what's going on with humanity, what are some of your philosophies there?
Well, if I can break into a rather, well, I'll use a little bit of what's happened as a way of explaining my philosophy.
Perfect.
My work as an actor, and I began professionally in 1975. I came out from New York, from Juilliard, where I'd been studying. And I was very fortunate because I started performing fairly early in that year. But I also had done, I think in 1980, I'd done the show, television show Dallas, and it was a very popular show. But what was happening at that time was I was realizing that what Hollywood was considering success, it wasn't that I wanted to bite the hand that fed me. I didn't want to critique what wasn't. I thought, well, I'm gifted with this opportunity. But I realized if I'm going to fill in the depth, I have to do this myself. And my father was one of the founders of the Malibu Art Association, and my mom was a teacher. And so I grew up with this very strong sense that it's to get together and to inspire each other. The critique we do for ourselves, and we live in a world of critique rather than encouragement. And so people are very afraid to express themselves. This is why in 1981, when Carla, my wife, and I moved back to Malibu, I opened my home. And every Tuesday night and Thursday night for the last 44 years, I've hosted discussion groups. And we've looked at Eastern and Western traditions, indigenous traditions. I had a theosophical discussion group every week in my home for 25 years, read The Secret Doctrine of Blavatsky's in group. And to balance that, we've read Jung's Red Book, we've read William Blake. So essentially what I did was I realized early on, for some strange reason, that Hollywood had given me an opportunity to live where I lived. But I had to do the rest. So I opened up my home, and I invited those that I called them the band of the curious, because that's what I loved about theater. It wasn't your background, it wasn't who you knew or what you did. It was your love of what you were doing.
Your version of the Merry Pranksters.
Yeah, I love people who love what they do. I love talent. I love those that are, in a sense, willing to leave their baggage, which isn't the most interesting thing to talk about, and come together with us and say, you know what, if we do something, who knows where we'll go together. So the merging of my life, because when I was doing Dallas, I realized that it was not, whatever success was in that world was not success for me.
It just wasn't satisfying.
I needed it to
day
be,
to day.
Yeah, and so I was sketching, I was drawing. I didn't think of myself as an artist because my dad was an artist. But he had given me great advice. He said, when you can't talk about something, paint it. And so at Juilliard, I had really had a character that I was supposed to play, a very hateful character, and I couldn't find it. And so I started using pigment, as a way of connecting with emotional truth. And so I got large pieces of paper and just pigment. I used my hand, my fist, my arm, because I wanted to move away from the optics of painting. I didn't mean to, essentially, but I was rediscovering a much more indigenous approach to the creative spirit, not optically to be an artist in the collective culture of what's going on in the present moment, but a much more interesting use of the tools themselves, using the creative act as a way of not trying to do something, but to connect with something. And so my art became my companion. I didn't think it would become what it became. That's what I find so fascinating. If you'd asked me when I started out as an actor, what do you think about art? I would have said, well, I don't, I do it because I love it, but I don't expect it to become anything. And maybe it was because there wasn't any expectation, just a great deal of consternation with the outer world. It was during the Reagan years. I found that I became very aware that essentially Hollywood would take over politics, and we could not have a legitimate conversation. And I knew it. I saw it coming. I knew enough about history. I said, it's coming. It's going to be, are you for the blue team or the red team? Are you for the green team or the yellow team? And I thought, that's really bad theater, and I'm not going to participate as one of the clowns in that show. So in my discussion groups, I banished politics 44 years ago. I said, if we're going to be interesting, we're not going to discuss the things that make us small and hateful. We're going to actually discuss the things that are in the inheritance of the human species. So I also am a book collector of an enormous library, and I feel like the librarian. I have that happiness of a librarian. I look at people and I say, I don't really want to critique the books. I don't really care what you read. I just want you to put it together in a way you can live with. And that's the art of being human. So for me, I've tried to live a life that as an actor allowed me the freedom to ask questions that I didn't have to ask anybody else's permission to do, because the world doesn't take polymaths seriously. They want to know what you do. If you're an actor, you're an actor. We don't like to mix and match as we did in the old days, but it was very freeing for me, because now, as you know, I invite people to my house. I share my work with them, because I'm interested in the intimacy, the last key. Even my last name is McCloskey, the lost key. And the last key is...
Is that what that translates to?
Actually, it is, or the close key, the lost key. So the lost key would be intimate. The lost key is art. No one talks about art. Who talks about wisdom or soul or meaning or love? We might, but in the larger media, it just doesn't sell.
It doesn't sell.
So when we realize that, then people say, well, where's the future? It's where it's quiet right now, because we're doing our work. My work is as a gardener. I have been gardening, cultivating the story of the human soul in a time where people don't even think there is such a thing. What a wonderful time to do so, because there's not a lot of chaos and disconcerting voices, because people have decided through science that many of the questions of the arts have no particular relevance. They're not applicable. You've got to come up with formulas.
But God is working through you when you're in your creative mind.
Absolutely.
Right.
God is the creative mind.
God is the creative mind. And I seem to, I've been to your home and to these events, and I think Kira refers to it. Our dear friend Kira, who I'm dying to get on this podcast. She's fantastic. I think she refers to it as your mystery school.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And how lovely is that? And what a great, I don't know if she coined that or you did, but it's wonderful. And it does seem like when you're in that room, people are discovering their own mysteries as well as other people's. It brings about something, that energetic force within the room brings about something that wouldn't happen if we were sitting alone.
Yes. And also in the intimate space of home, the sacred space of where one lives and loves.
And it's a spectacular environment. I mean, it really is created for artists and seekers, and it's spectacular. I've never seen anything like it. I don't think there is anything like it.
I don't think, because and when we realized that it was triggered on 9/11, 2001, when the towers in New York came down. And one of the great tools that I had been working on before that was the tarot. I had spent 17 years revisioning the major arcana of the tarot. And my book, Tarot Revisioned, immodestly speaking, but it was reviewed as possibly the most significant contribution in over 100 years to the tradition. And it really, I believe, is in the sense that the questions of metaphysics have so often been really very much in a type of patriarchal 19th century proposition, not really about what are the archetypes in regards to how we live, how we love, what is the nature and struggle of the human journey, and how do the archetypes help us. So my work takes us, and it's very interesting that its location is my home, because its nature is to bring us home, bring us back to intimacy. If I'm directing an actor and I'm directing you, I would want to find out how you are wired. Are you responding more empathetically, emotionally, more intellectually, so we can really have a conversation? Another actor might be very different. But like dealing with different instruments, you're trying to find the tone, the truth of that instrument. And the one thing that the hieroglyph of the human soul does now, after working on it every day.
Is this the name of your tarot?
Yeah, the tarot is downstairs, and the tarot revision in my drawings are in black and white, but I liken them to the keys of the piano, meaning that, and they're even called keys, that when we begin to understand the nature of the psyche, the structure, is a pattern. And that and this is why the labyrinth, this is why we have mystery schools, because what the story is that it's trying to remind that who you are in the mirror is a person you think of as temporary because it's been here for so very short a time. But what you are composed of is an ancientness beyond your imagining. It is composed of hieroglyphic sigils, meaning signatures within the body, that these symbols and these signs, one doesn't need to be intellectual about. They have a rapport, much like music has a rapport with the body. Like, what is it that makes us want to dance when you start hearing rock and roll? What is it why does the body? We don't have to be taught about these things. We have to be toned by them. We have to allow them to be our environment, how we breathe, so to speak. That's why the theatrical element of my home is very important, because in theater you create props for the actor. You create a setting for the imagination. If I create a setting for the 16th century and put you in the right clothing, it's not a leap for you imaginatively to hold that space. Yes, I'm in the 16th century.
Setting, of course.
Yeah, and that's the agreement. That's the suspension of disbelief. So what the room does is when a person is there, because there's nothing being told to them, you must be this way. It is a picture language, an environment. They are able to open and hear themselves intimately because there's no machinery. They are the technology. So my work, to a great degree, is the inverse of what is happening in terms of a technology, because my work in the room is this story that we are the outcome of a great question called What Does It Mean to Be Human? And that it began in the Painted Cave with the questions of survival and meaning. Because if we lost a child, how do we tell the story to the family, to ourselves, that invests it with meaning? Otherwise, it's simply violence, and meaningless, and we will certainly go mad. So the human condition to not go mad, to compensate, because it has never been able to know why, has had to invent story. It's had to draw something out of itself in order to survive. I say art doesn't come from being creative. That's nonsense.
Does it come from pain?
It comes from anguish. It comes from the need to transmute that which is unspeakably difficult into something that can be shared. This is a sign of our natural heroic truth behind the human condition. A species that was willing to enter, without knowing why, having forgotten everything that it once was, so that although composed of the stars, it would have to humanize that knowledge. It could not build fantastically large sites connected to the heavens, the obelisks, they would be knocked over. The antenna would be lost. Goddess would be forgotten, and man and woman would have to find a way, having forgotten and lost everything, to make sense of the human condition. And that's why when we see our arts, when we see the anguish from which they were drawn, when we understand the alchemy of the human condition, it's about time we have some sympathy for a magnificent species that has never known why, has always been faced like Job with, will you love me in spite of every reason not to?
Right. This is part of, again, why I think art makes you cry, whether it's beautiful or angry.
Absolutely.
Right, they're just the polarity, but they come together in the end, and it's actually the transmutation of these emotion.
That's the key.
That's the key.
Because and a lot of my work also, the sacred feminine has returned the mother, mater, mother, the knowledge of our atoms. She says that there are no evil atoms. If we don't like our atoms, if we don't like our stories, we must tell better stories. I am mater, mother.
Mother.
We are woven of this knowledge. And this is why much of my work, being in my home also on 9/11, was that I was told when the towers collapsed to build an ark inwardly. And I said, an ark? And it said, yes. And it said, but not all arks are created to navigate the physical waters. This ark is being constructed to navigate the mental waters. The human footprint is becoming vague. It is forgetting its own nobility. It is refusing to see its depth. So this ark will be for navigating the mental waters.
Is it a think tank? Would you call it a think tank of some
level? I
level?
would say it's a wonder study.
A wonder study, God.
It's a wonder study. It's more than thinking. The thinking is in all the books. If you want to think, open a book that's there.
Actually, the thinking hurts. It's the disconnection of the heart and the mind, when you actually start using the heart as a mind.
Exactly.
That's the key.
And then the environment holds you. This is what the Gnostics knew. They called it the nous. It was that we're held in a container. That's what I love about the space. Because at home, when people come to my home, I say, how do you feel? I say, I feel safe. I say, that's where we begin. You have to feel safe. Certain ideas, you have to feel safe. You have to feel that you are in a mature relationship, meaning you are the one that is protecting these things. This is the deep feminine. This is the beloved. We have taken without giving anything back for so very long. And that's why my home is on Chumash ancestral ground. I'm the white boy on Indian land. So the question is, what do you do with that? And the ancestors teach me. The library teaches me. The pain is in every book. The disappointment, the confusion, the intolerance is in every story. That has never been fixable any more than the ocean can be smoothed out. The question has always been, how do we navigate? How do we actually ask the right questions that aren't against others or condemning parts of the library or books or authors in the library for being wrong? The mother says, I love all of my books. I love all of my children. I give no one the right to brutalize any of them for any reason. If you don't like the stories, don't read those books, but realize that they are part of the human story. And if you're going to put the human story together, it's like a piano. You can't cut off 5 or 6 keys because you're not particularly fond of those flats or those sharps.
Well, it's also not just the story of man. It's one story, right? We can't cut out that part of our story that we don't like. We have to learn to honor it and realize that it's either made us deeper. Hopefully, as we get older, we know how to take the pain and weave it into something that becomes a teacher for us.
That was the 24-hour-a-day model I realized that I was working with, because so many of the metaphysics, esotericism, ayahuasca, it's not applied in a way that is about building something. It's an escape from something. It's an alternative to something. The question for me is, how do we live with the psyche 24 hours a day? And where do we live? Where do we ask those questions? Where do my responsibilities begin? Is it for me to have an experience, or is it to see myself in a larger context that is the experience? I think that home becomes the pervasive metaphor in my work, but also I think in the revelation now that's occurring, which is that everything is very large, very exaggerated, very noisy. And so the question became, where are we not looking? Why are we, in the training that we've had, always thinking that it's somewhere else, it's someone else, it's not me, it's them? And the question that has been revealed now, I mean, I should say the revelation, is that my work in my home, my work on the Tarot revision, on the hieroglyph of the human soul, my book's called The Codex Tor, and the emergence of what's known as the Watcher language, all of this is indicating to me that what has occurred in my home is the igniting of what is known as sacred technology. I've never sold my art. I've never tried to have a gallery. I had a show last year, but it was offering it, to share it. I had to make giclées of my work that are now I can sell, but they, I do feel, are talismanic. They're not a type of buy it because it's an artist's work, but actually it is the scribal work of that which needed to express, and it found its way through me because I was not trying to invest it with the contemporary sense of how can I sell this. I had to do that as an actor. So the last thing I thought about was, how do I sell my artwork to people that don't care about it? In a sense, how can I convince them that I should have a reputation when I don't? And it gave me a great freedom, because I said, I do this for myself. And that's my father would always say, don't paint to please other people. Don't paint for all the wrong reasons. Know yourself, be true to yourself, and never laugh at another person's dreams, is what he would tell me.
And he's right. But it's also setting yourself, he didn't want you to set yourself up for disappointment. And you don't have to. Well, because if you're free in what you do and you have no expectations, it comes to you.
And that's why, I mean, I guess I was, in fact, I know I was very lucky. I was born on the summer solstice. I'm a 29-degree Gemini, and somehow this twin self conspired to create a twin. I could have a public twin that protected my private twin. And my private twin was asking at home questions about the nature of the divine, of the sacred, was asking, why are we wired the way we are? I wanted tools. So the questions in the discussion groups that I would then always be translating through the visual, not something I thought optically, but like a musician turning a conversation into a song. It was like, well, where does this gestate? How does this take from this into another context? And what's extraordinary now, the alchemy of what I've done, is because it was not a conceit, but what has happened. Because as you know, with 3D glasses, which was not expected, Don Estes, my friend, told me many years ago.
That's crazy.
He said, have you looked at this with 3D glasses? And I thought, no. But when I did, and it was about a year into the work, suddenly the floor fell away, and what I was doing was a multidimensional, stable work of creation. If we don't look at that as art, which means we can dismiss it because it's just art, it's not science, it's not technology, it's not the important stuff. And I do mean that. We have really dismissed. In the Renaissance, we didn't. My Renaissance is different because in the Renaissance, art, if it was beautiful, you were creating something eternal. So the truth you were expressing was transcending the boundaries of mere words. But now we want mere words to create all the boundaries. So we're afraid of all the different things we need, all the drugs we need, our body we have to distrust because, oh my God, it's just a machine that's going to die, as opposed to a sacred technology that's waiting for the right triggers in order to remember that it is exactly that, and what the smog keeping it from that knowledge is our belief systems. And that's why only the arts can ultimately transform what we believe, because that's where music, art, poetry, love says, if you express this celebration, You will not be trapped by the mediocrity of fear that those who wish to sell you something because they are afraid, and if you're afraid too, they've got security in numbers.
I agree with you completely, and I think I've been reading this philosopher, Vladimir, I can't think of his last name, a Russian, and he talks about how through art, I love the Russian philosophers. They're so dark and so heavy, and right. He says that part of what makes art, the connection to art and God, is that it's the only time the heart, it's one of the few times, unless you're really a master of meditation or something, that the mind and the heart connect in an organic way, where the mind isn't dictating to the heart what to feel, or the heart isn't so filled with emotion that the mind is creating a story.
Right.
And so what happens is, as these two are perfectly aligned, so comes our creation.
And if we think about one of in the calligraphy, the art of calligraphy was the art of capturing chi, or prana, breath. And so it wasn't to illustrate something. It wasn't to make it legible. It was that by allowing the breath to be captured, that would create a place of eternal return. So one would have the eternal breath captured through the artist, made manifest or fixed. This is why when we look at, and I tell people often when they're in the hieroglyph of the human soul, I say, you must remember that we're inside of an enormous lung here, because when the artist paints, breath
Genius.
is being expressed. The heart, the devotion is coming through the brush. So that sensitivity, because everything is atoms, as Walt Whitman said, every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. So every atom belonging to me as good belongs to this microphone.
Walt Whitman, Einstein, Tesla, everything is energy. And it's interesting because chi should never be dismissed, because the more chi, the greater the auric field, the more power you have, more creative force. And it's this is not a strength of power, but it's more a manifestation of power.
Absolutely.
And the bigger the chi, and people think, oh, well, I don't really have to move my body. Well, guess what? You have to move your prana, and you have to move your body. If you want to be a creative type and you want things to go the way you envision them, if you want life to work for you, you have to work with it.
Absolutely.
And chi is key to that. And this is why when sometimes you don't even realize it, but if you see a lethargic person or someone tells you they didn't wake up till 12 in the afternoon, there's always that gotta do something to jumpstart this person.
Well, I think people live on battery life, which is why they drink Red Bull and all that, because they're not actually... If you are inspired, you're fed energy. A performer knows this. If she's up on stage and suddenly people go, we love you, it's like, bam, that energy isn't hers, it's there. And this is one of the things I feel that we misunderstand, because we're not taught to think performatively. We're taught to think obediently. So we're taught to gather facts, we're taught to figure things out and to have a theory about something, but not to engage it directly. This is one of the things I liked about acting. You can't blame a bad performance on God. You can't blame it on the other actors. You can't blame it. You have to look at yourself and say, if you didn't show up, it's you that didn't show up. So let's talk, and let's not make it about other people. Let's make it about you. And this is why this is my home. My joke is, but it's true, and my cosmology is quite grand. And I say, no matter how grand your cosmology, at home your wife looks at you blankly and says, honey, take out the garbage. And I'm there. I mean, I'm there with consciousness. It's like, take out the garbage. Get over this sort of notion that there's enough money or enough something that's going to somehow overcome the fact that you are going to die. And if that's the question, then back engineer from that moment. Because when my mom did die, I asked her, I said, how long does life seem like it's been? And literally the last words out of her mouth were, it seems like it just began. She closed her eyes, smiled sweetly, and passed away forever.
Yes, none of us get out of here alive.
No, and if that's the case, then that's why I feel like the really grateful librarian, because all the books tell me the same thing. We didn't get out of this, but we did something with it while we were here.
Are the books your Akashic field? Is this
Actually,
sort of?
I'm quite certain now that my work is the Akashic that has been slowed down into the human.
Interesting.
Because if you think of the transmutive force, right, the Akashic is star knowledge, universal knowledge, the capacity to know directly. So why would we stop knowing directly? Why would we, as Einstein said, slow down thought to a rate where we can perceive it?
You have to slow down the frequency in order to do that, so the human beings can catch it,
and so
while
we can
they're
become human. You see, that's what's fascinating. We are wired with this cosmic genius that you and I don't know how to translate food into energy, but it does for us. We don't. So most of that is taken care of, meaning that the system's fine. Now, the mystery of the system are the questions you ask, the relationship you have with it. If you feel you're just a prisoner trapped in this body.
Is it a matrix? Do you know how to navigate the matrix?
And notice how individuals that feel that have constructed a reality around that which amplifies the truth of what they feel. This is the magic of perception. I know this directly now. I live in an environment that is multidimensional, that is stable. So it's not bleeding through like there are phantoms walking in, but more like theater. If I want the phantoms, I blur my eyes a bit, and they're there because they're coming from my relationship, not invading me, as though I've created something that is, and this is the theater of it. Theater has boundaries. People need to cultivate boundaries. Ring past knots, meaning that this is why this is my home. I call it the etiquette of energy. A person's home is not something that you're entitled to. So when you come and see my art, you're not entitled to it.
You're invited.
You're invited, which means the etiquette is I trust you. And that means a lot to a lot of people. I can't tell you how many people come to my home and go, you let me come into your home? I go, yeah. And that's part of the point.
It's because they wouldn't let you in theirs. Or they might not.
But it's
a projection.
The last part of the hero's journey is after the journey, after so many dragons. How do we forgive ourselves? How does the inner self-loathing allow us back home? Because the question is, art it being rejected is often rejected because of an unworthiness inside of the individual saying, if I accept this beauty, I suddenly have to allow myself to have a very different relationship with what I think of as reality. And so there, if I reject it, I can stay satisfied.
Or I have another philosophy. Tell me what you think of this. I think it's much easier for the mind to focus. I mean, really focus and come, like I said, I think that part of what makes manifestation so powerful is when the heart and the mind are aligned. Right? I think it's much easier for human beings to think negative, to focus on negativity. Yeah. And therefore, they're creating negativity in their lives. Yes. Yeah. If we could sort of change our thought cycle and make it easier to think about that which we love and that which we want, rather than that which we're trying to avoid. We're avoidant human beings.
But I think that one of the questions now is why, in everything that's going on, in a very apocalyptic period of time where things are exaggerated, there's great difficulty, and as you said, people are really adding things up negatively about why things are not, what is not. And part of my practice, I call it a mental martial art, a type of yoga, which is that it's not to say I should not have those feelings, the sense of negative, because they are reactive.
And they're a reality. And to push them out is giving them power.
And they will become more and more predominant.
Absolutely.
And that's why choice, and if we begin to understand that choice creates probability, it opens up not something that is given, but something that is possible. And this is why when we think performatively, the more, and if you think as an athlete or you think as a performer, that of course you're there. If you're standing on those skis and you're about to go down that enormous jump, the heart is in the throat because there's this threshold moment. But then it opens, and suddenly you've given yourself so completely to the experience that there's no turning back. And that stepping off point is the thing that one cannot do for another person. But the extremes going on in this world right now are forcing individuals, and this is why I tell them, I say, look, we don't leave the womb because we want to. We leave the womb and are born because we are forced to. The womb itself becomes toxic. We cannot remain there.
And we're ready.
And this is what is happening on this planet.
So yes, absolutely. And while many of us have the tools to project that which we know is correct, like to stay out of the negative, you got to learn it over and over again.
Because the negative isn't learned or unlearned. The negative is in us. We are
It's
composed of a
it's the
DNA
first gear we switch, we shift into.
because we have developed from fragmentation and trauma. All of my art is based on trauma. My wife's stroke, my father's death, the 9/11.
What about the yoni? Is that trauma? Is that trauma related?
Everything is the trauma into birth, because the underlying narrative that is revealed in the work I'm exploring is that we are born into creation, not time, that we are phoenixes, and that we are not, that the whole notion of time is completely erroneous.
Back to the
which
quantum.
is why my painting, Phoenix Arise, which I had painted over a 4-year period in 1996, and then I created as a card, an invitation, which is very mythic, for my book on Tarot Revision, which was released in 2003. When I got the invitations, which there were 365 sent out, and for those that know about anything like Abraxas or the solar year or mythology, realize, okay, so the solar year was sent out, which tracks with this ancient text called the Hermetica. So invitations are sent out. There's a sense that everyone is invited to mind, but most don't show up. And so those that show up are given mind. Those that don't show up are given the gift of reason. So I sent out the cards, and when I got them back, I dropped them. And when I dropped them, long story short, it reveals a holographic, multidimensional 3D DNA strand as a fractal mathematical representation of my art, which is what? Creation. Then it not only does that, but that wherever it is opened as a wheel, it creates infinite mandalas, infinite blossoms. So it is the first time in the history of art that a painting bearing the title Phoenix Arise as a fixed image, meaning it's the iteration of one card after another. So nothing is moving. It's not a movie. It's not something, another thing doing something for us. It is a tangible, fractal, mathematical work of creation that every time we put it together, it's always whole. Like when you
Is it holographic?
It's holographic. And when it comes together, it will blossom in infinite ways and need infinite different numbers of cards. The mathematics is the message. This will say the same thing in 10,000 years. This is a direct communication from Pythagoras, but in visual form. And this is why it's very interesting how quiet it has remained, because I thought, well,
It would explode.
It would explode. People.
It may.
I think it will, but the frame of reference is not there yet. This is I realize that my work is about 40 years working up through the territory, because now my work is not going to happen. It is a manifestation. So what I am offering is manifest technology. It's a mind ship. It's not a spaceship. We don't go anywhere in a hologram. This is the limitation of our science. We think in terms of time and reflection. Of course, if you're trying to get somewhere in a mirror, you're not going to get anywhere very quickly. And this is what we look at the stars and we do that. 300 million light years away, we'll never get there. It goes, and all the sages go, that's because you're looking out further and further toward the surface. And you
of course. But here is something I will point out to you, and you mentioned it earlier. We are on the cusp of the age of Aquarius. I mean, we're essentially there, but we're being ushered in. And they say it's going to be about 2035 before we're fully there. And that might be something that will be appreciated more in that era, with those minds and with that sort of a sophisticated, the children that are being born now are so much more sophisticated and enlightened than we were at that age.
They need to be triggered. This is why with autism, with a lot of this learning disabilities, that what is happening is that what we consider communication, I and thou, is dissolving, and everything from
Have you seen the telepathy tapes?
Yes, and this is why, if we look at the ideal of Renaissance was not one of us. It was the realization that each of us bring unique capacities, lenses of a particular expertise, that then come together and create a larger. This is one of the things behind the discussion groups in my home, is that I realize that it is like a professional acting group or music group, not that the people are professionals, But it's the respect, meaning that if you play the saxophone, I play the trumpet, and we're in a jazz band, I'm not going to say, oh, you know what you need to do.
No, you're a jam band.
I'm going to riff
You're the Grateful
with you.
Dead.
And that to me is etiquette. That's how we treat each other. We don't treat each other like we want to debate, make less, and ridicule one another. No performer of any note does that.
Or be
and this
better
is one
than.
of the things where I simply find the behavior on the part of academia, on the part of science, on the part of money-motivated science is never going to produce the missing key.
Because it lacks
It
consciousness.
is only the consequence of those that had said, like I did in 1981, the way this is going, the questions I need to ask are not being asked by this culture. The art world has no interest in this way of going deep into the soul. It doesn't even believe painting should be. You know, it was this whole relevance of art is irrelevant. And I thought, who is behind that? Because once you do that, once you convince individuals it's just about investing in art, which really begins in the 80s, you can really begin to understand why artists, creative beings have to go, fine, but we're retreating. You won't see us for a while, but where the future will come from is not going to be going faster and faster nowhere, or more and more noisily into a type of technological future that has very little interest in human beings.
Well, it's just very
and if
Piscean.
it's not human, it's not our story.
It's very Piscean in terms of, money and monetary and who's better and bigger and more. I mean, as you drove up to my house, I'm sure you were aware of, these beautiful homes being destroyed to build a 60,000 square foot home. It's bigger, it's more.
Well, if I can be a little,
Of
I
course.
don't want to be dark, but...
oh, please do.
Okay. It was in 2018, November 9th. It had been 2 years since the election. Malibu and the Woolsey fire erupted, like the Palisades. It was the rehearsal. But because my wife and I stayed, it came to my door as a fire tornado, and it pushed me back into the house. And it said one thing, are you staying or leaving? And I told the fire, I'm staying. And something fierce came out of me. Mm-hmm. And that then... for the next, I don't know, it kept coming back and coming back. It was like a demon. There was just nothing that would abate this fire, and it was huge. And the third night I was out battling embers, and this dark, almost like a Stephen King novel. The force wraps itself around me. I hear it hissing. Tell me what you hate, and I'll burn down your house. And it was gleeful. And it said there's a drought in the human heart. Human beings are forgetting what they love and only knowing what they hate. I am an apocalyptic fire that will destroy this brittleness from within. I will bring the human race to its knees. This is the apocalypse. It's only just beginning. Believe me, I sobered up quickly about the sense that we are in charge of anything. It's that people think that they can build high walls and large houses and give nothing back to the land, as though that will somehow keep these fires away. It was like talking to a dragon. Truly like talking. And dragons don't like humans because all we do is take. All we do is think we're self-important, and to them we're just morsels, something to be eaten. And if we don't behave, we will be eaten. I just find the hubris, Gilgamesh, the Great Flood, all of these things. I just marvel, and I've been building an ark for 24 years. So, you wonder about that. What is this ark? Because it told me when I was building it, we don't build spaceships. We build mind ships. There's no there in a hologram. Where do you think you would go? Do you really think the boys that think we're going to another planet when we can't even actually do much of anything? We have all of these illusions based on conceit and very little based on actual evidence. What we could be if we could believe the illusions we project. And I think that's the humility at my home, is its first technology. People come to my home and say, nothing's being done here. This is just paint. And when you put on the 3D glasses and it's multidimensional, guess what? I didn't do it. It's inherent. So guess what? That's the message. I'm not telling you something.
What about expansion?
It's telling you something.
Is expansion a message?
Absolutely. Right. But expansion within boundaries. See, my home, a library, is a time machine because all of the times are there. But the genius in my phoenix chair, as you sit in the phoenix chair, one is reminded you are a phoenix. So look at the library, look at the mural, look at the interactive beauty of this. Breathe it in, like sitting in the middle of a beautiful forest. You are a tree in this beautiful forest, but the genius is you are a tree that is uniquely you. That's the gift when you look in the mirror. But don't you keep staring at the mirror and thinking, oh, it's me. You're stuck, like Dorothy was stuck in Oz, going, I want to go
You're
home.
part of a forest.
And what did the Good Witch say? Dorothy, close your
Close your
eyes,
eyes.
turn around, you're home. And I really know that this is what's going to happen when people start shouting.
Because all the other three characters already had what they needed.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
really about learning that you have what you need.
And seeing beneath the black and white. She returns to black and white, not to escape love, but to realize that love is often set in a very difficult black and white world. But that's not the key to the world. The world has magical realms, but it's not to escape to magical realms. It's to bring that magic back to the black and white.
Black and white.
I see in you something more than just a farmer with a, you're a lion. If people gave themselves permission.
Yes, I'm getting goosebumps right now.
This is one of the things that's been lost. The containment of the identity is about people worrying about the fragility of their identity. That's a symptom that there is no root. There's no depth.
No, when
There's
we're
only
not
the fear
rooted.
of what would be lost if what I see in the mirror, I don't know. And I'm trying to say, you know enough. You've learned enough. You need to trust. You need to turn around. You need to look away from what you think is wrong with you. Everyone feels that.
But we haven't always. When did it start?
It started truly, I believe, because of when we lost connection to nature.
Yeah, me too. Lost connections.
And my work with the goddess, with Lilith, where she's on the other side of a painting. So she's not seeable until we actually turn her outward. And her story is that she told me, she said, if the goddess, the love of the goddess is outward, none of us would believe we were separate. We would recognize that all things are sacred, that human life is sacred, that you are a sister,
And that we are
I am a
one.
brother, that we are not. So the question of why, and this is where I think it really begins, and this is what happens in the hieroglyph, is that we see a right angle. We see Sophia, the great mother, and she shows us with her belly the face of a child, which is that to be human will be a time of entering innocence. We won't remember why we are doing this. But the goddess in this narrative, for this to happen, says, I must turn myself inward. If I'm outward, you will always know. So I will completely disappear from the outer. I will become your roots. I will support woman in her journey of betrayal, because that's what it will be. When the goddess is forgotten, woman is betrayed, God is set as something not oneself and elsewhere and angry, and this helps to develop the ego. The ego is based on the sense that I'm not enough, I have somewhere to go, and if I don't get there, I'm not going to be anything. And darling, I'll get back to you because I've got to make something of myself first, and then I'll come back, I'll have some value, and when I have value, I'll show you that we have value. Do you see the desperation in that?
Of course. But how do you get directly to, I have value?
By realizing to a great degree that what composes the human spirit, its arts, its music, its anguish, is the alchemy that, and Jakob Böhme, the wonderful Christian mystic from the 17th century, he said that he talked about 7 principles, and for me the first 3 are particularly important, because he called the first principle magnetical hunger, which is in the human condition, it's the desire to contract and just stay tight. I just want to contract. But the second principle is just as powerful, which is the desire to expand.
Expand.
And so this desire to contract and the desire to expand are constantly in a dynamic tension, in that the third principle was what he called schrock. No, the third principle was anguish, meaning that the 2 inescapable first principles created the third principle, which was the state of anguish, which is the human condition, because we can't escape it, we can't actually be in it completely, so it's feeling betwixt and between, the trauma of where am I? How? But then he brings in what he calls schrock, which is the lightning bolt, and it's a brilliant notion, because he says the lightning bolt is the love of God that enters this anguished world. But like lightning, the light is not permanent. It's momentary. It lights up the sky, and you can see for a moment. So you know that it's there, but it dissipates because
it's a reminder.
It's not to get out of anguish. This is why if we move from a religious model or a scientific model of repeatability, of numbers, of statistics, and much more into this other deeper sense that
I think we're heading in that direction,
and that's
don't
why
you?
I think alchemy has become more pervasive.
Oh, yeah.
Because
And frequencies are becoming pervasive. Everything. It's the future of
and that's
medicine.
why I think that what's happening, you talked about younger generations, because I feel they have to be triggered, and I feel that the young scientists, the ones coming up, are filled with this other possibility that the tools are being laid out, but how they will be utilized, I believe, is because it's right that the consciousness that creates the problem, and that's the problem. The consciousness that has created the problem has risen into power as the problem.
It's also very limiting, and I think these new kids, this new generation, these star children, these Aquarian age kids, are not going to be limited.
The what?
I don't think they're going to be limited. I think they are going to really be expansive.
No, and that's why though my work is about the etiquette of energy. It's like it's really based on theatrical etiquette. You do not step on other people's characters. You have no right to critique another performer. Yours is to deal with what you are to deal with. This idea of, what's wrong with you? I would always answer, yes, I do. And that is not the interesting part, nor is it worth a conversation. It's like, why I don't talk about my problems? I don't find my own problems interesting. So why should I find your problems? And we have to wean ourselves from what we are investing our time in. This is why I do. I'm a first technology guy, meaning I use paint and storytelling and home, because that's the message. That what's missing is the human key, the intimate key, the key that we can actually reach out and touch one another. And we are so, to a great degree, I don't believe that you can tell anybody what to do, but I believe that we are all fundamentally examples by which those that wish to pay attention will. Because the things I asked in terms of a creative life, now I've become the person I wanted to meet when I was 20.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
A little bit less so, because I'm not quite as advanced as you are.
No, but you're not almost 70 either.
It's very funny. I was saying to Kira before you came on, I'm like, sometimes I don't understand him. I don't know what to do. She goes, just tell him that. He'll get it.
Yeah.
And it's not often that I can say that to someone.
Yeah.
I mean, I read heavy philosophy, and yet when I'm sitting in your house and you're going off, and it is definitely a subconscious rant. I mean, it is coming through you. It is a message, and I'm like, wow. What I almost wish I could record it, because I'm like, what did I miss in that? And there's a lot. But now that I'm sitting with you and I have I'm staring at you and I have your undivided attention, it's much clearer to me.
Well, that's great. Well, and I feel that element of the exuberant dialogue, of that which
dialogue.
Almost that oracular willingness to say, I'm not sure what's going to flow, but let's see where it goes. And much of it, I feel, is this calling back to, because we're so used to literalism. Like, well, what did you mean by that? Well, what are the facts? And give me your data. It's not an interesting performance. In other words, like if you go to Shakespeare, I always say, if you listen to Be or Not to Be, when he says, bear bodkin, most people stop and go, what's a bodkin? And by the time the brain is trying to figure out what a bodkin is, about the next 8 or 10 lines,
you've missed everything.
But it's more of a musical event. And that's what I try to do with expressing things, because I realize that the truth of the ideas often that are flowing through me are like a musical piece. They really have a type of fundamental structure that, as it lays out, I think, because I don't know where it's going. Like someone will say, well, what did you say? And every single line in the painting is literally, it's like an informing presence. It reminded me in Superman where Joran was doing with the bowls or something, and every time he'd put his finger, it would speak. And that's what my pen became.
Well, do you remember what you said? Or does it sort of leave you? Is it just you're emoting?
It flows through me. As I say, I'm a canoe that doesn't go two ways. So
you can recall. You can recall what you...
No, I can't. No, I don't recall. Sometimes if I'm lucky, I do. But if it's really interesting, there's no way.
Right, because you're deep in it. You're in a meditation.
I'm going, I don't know.
It's almost, Leigh, you're almost channeling.
Well, I feel that's what we are. It's like
dancers. We are channels,
going,
for sure.
You put on the music, my body wants to move, honey.
Yeah,
it's
but here's the deal.
Yeah.
Not all of us are capable of tuning in, right?
That's
so
true.
We're radio, right?
Yeah,
we're not a transmitter, we're a receiver.
Right.
And you got to turn it, and then you got to tune it.
Yeah.
So you're clearly in tune. Most of us are not, or we are part of the time, and then we fall out. But I feel when you're able to receive on that level and emote, I think that you're in your frequency. You're connected,
and I think
to your station.
What's intriguing for me, because a lot of times we talk about different things we want to do, but the question we don't ask is, where can I do this? Where is the location that there's enough intimacy to ask these deep questions? So, not again thinking that I was doing this, but inadvertently, what I was creating was a type of question about, because it being my home, the symbolism is it's intimate space, it's private space, meaning that it's protected space, it's the 24-hour-a-day space.
Well, it's also sacred space because it's sacred land.
And if you have family, as I do, it's where you live with your family. So the questions aren't just about what's in it for me, but how do we do this together, which is a different etiquette now than for, in a way, arguing with the neighbor about what's wrong with the world. This is, yes, what's wrong with the world is what's wrong with the world, but when I move past my fence into my home, the question isn't about what's wrong with the world, because then I'll bring that into my home. This was my question about the hero's journey. How do we return home after so long away, after so many battles, after so many scars and so much trauma? How do we give ourselves permission to re-enter innocence, to come home finally without, and especially as a man, without this sense of absolute, overwhelming guilt over the profound cruelty that has been waged through men and through the time.
So is it letting go? What is the key?
What I find is that it's the recognition of the human form divine, that we're all woven of inexcusable traumas, of conditions that none of us would even wish to reimagine.
Forgiveness.
And that's the mother in this, is that she says, I love all of my children. When you come home, I realize in your book how weary you are and how many mistakes you feel you've made, but I love you. That's the story of Job. It's that the love is not the proof the neighbor feels from you or what people hear in your church. It really is, how do you treat your family? How do you treat those you love? How do you treat your animals? Because they are the microcosm. They're beings. They are consciousness, sentience. And so our etiquette begins at home. And if we understood this, then we wouldn't be deciding what's wrong with the world and why I need to get on some instrument of media and tell everyone why they're idiots, or why I would tell the actors, I said, stop sharing your politics, because what you're doing is you're insulting half of the audience, saying you're not smart enough to agree with me. And I said, that's not my job. As one of the things with Olendar, my home, I will not post politically. I said,
I will never.
I said, I hope no one knows what I am.
And first of all, nobody knows what's going on. So
exactly.
it's actually moronic.
Is what makes people small and angry.
I agree.
And so I consciously said, I think the greatest revolution is to love with a capital L, to recognize that if you have been given something, share something. And don't do it because you think you have to. Do it simply because you can. And that, to me, is just setting up the healing element. I often feel we are an autoimmune reaction.
Well, we're also divisive, and when you do that, you just create a deeper wedge.
And that's why in my discussion groups, I always have a book, an author, really to examine ideas and to move us away from personal philosophies, I do it this way, I've figured it out, I'm an old soul kind of nonsense. To really, let's be a bit more humble. Let's be actors saying, look, it's Shakespeare, so let's not think we can wing it.
Right.
Let's think consciousness is maybe a more greater love affair that we need to live up to, because that's my work with the Grail. The Grail revelation in my work is that nothing is gained that is not earned. Nothing that is taken lasts. It is impermanent. And the only thing it does is essentially, as Christ asked, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? Time is done quickly, and no matter how much people feel they have nothing. Just ask the pharaohs. That's all I'm saying.
That's beautiful. Who's that from?
Me.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Holy cow. Wow, that was prophetic.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think, God, what a teacher you are.
Well, it's because, like the 9/11 moment, I said, who do I want to talk to? The people who did this? I don't know. It's too historical. They're doing it all the time. That's not the point. I want to tell my daughters, I love you. I admire a woman. I admire the strength of your mother who has transformed me. If anyone has healed my heart and soul, it's her. So this is the healing of the human race. If it's not her, it's not going to happen. If it's not home, it's not going to happen. If you think it's going to happen in a laboratory, then that's the reality you're agreeing to, not me. I'm going to do it in a garden. I'm returning to the garden. I'm reclaiming innocence, not as an act of, I'll be ignorant, but innocence in the same way Socrates meant it. I only know that I know nothing. Now I begin.
If you're only operating out of sort of your home and your private space, how do you become a bigger teacher to the world? How do you open your forum?
What is extraordinary is the tools are emerging to do just that. That I might be, really, because of AI, the last pure painter, in the sense that my work has all been by me. I've had no assistance. I've spent every day of my life working either on the Codex Tour, the Hieroglyph of the Human Soul, the Tarot Revision. They have been my mentors. When people ask who have been my teachers, they have. So when an individual looks at the work, realize that is the teaching. I'm not illustrating something I thought I knew. If I sound as though I know something, it's because it's manifested through me. It's transformed my very being. I'm woven of it. I can't, and that's probably why I also, when people say, I don't understand a lot of what he's saying, it's because it's alive. It's so alive that it isn't interested. It's odd. It has this energy in me, like, we're going sailing. Do you want to go sailing? If you have to figure out how to do the tack and everything, and you want to figure out,
it's of the moment. It's alive and in the moment,
yeah,
and it can't be captured.
Club. Yeah, because to me that's what musicians do. It's like, that was a great riff. Let's not break it down and analyze it.
Right? How can you? You feel it.
Yeah,
you feel it. Yeah. Well, because I do think, I mean, you're such a sophisticated teacher. I mean, there's so many out there, and you're denser in terms of the lessons, what you're saying. It's very prophetic and very dense, and it does require sophisticated thinking.
It also requires, what I find
feeling
very intriguing is that people are far more comfortable with words, in the sense that Oscar Wilde said it about Americans. He said, Americans that given an opportunity to go to heaven or go to a lecture about heaven seem to prefer the lecture.
The lecture.
And I've found that to be very true. That there's a resistance to experience. Like, we want to have the concept, like, there's karma and there's reincarnation, you see, and there are old souls, and but it's just a belief system. It's like an overcoat.
Right. Well, the psychedelic renaissance is changing that.
Yeah, it is. But
it's
what we need,
that.
and this is why my work, I feel, is so important, is because the Tarot Revisioned is the book that's been missing in that tradition. I say that immodestly, but after 17 years, if you've created Tiffany lamps, you might as well talk like Tiffany. I've created that in terms of tarot. They are exquisite because they're not my renditions. They are like a role emerging through an individual, where let's say the King Lear you created is great, but that's not you. That's the capacity of the instrument that has allowed it to flow through you. And that's why when you said about channeling, yeah, I do feel there's a deep oracular element in my voice, because I listen to myself. It's an odd feeling. I'm luckily a Gemini, because I can both hear myself and appreciate what I'm hearing, ask questions about what I'm hearing. So that's what's making me realize that what we think of as self is very limited until we become able, where we live. And one of the things that happened, and I often say that in the Hieroglyph of the Human Soul, I created a type of crystal radio set, that all of the symbols, all of the places, gave resonance. We're so used to art being, no, it's an illustration, which is not at all what creation is about. That's a cultural notion. Creation is about creating worthy resonance through beloved relationship with the object that imbues the object with a willingness on an atom level to be imbued with the essence of that which we are invoking. This goes back to how to draw a sculpture into a sculpture in the Hermetica, how to invoke energy. So much of my work, and I would highly recommend, I did Aquarian Realization as a YouTube. It's actually won a number of different awards, only about 11 minutes long, but I wanted to say, what is it that's going on? Because the shift isn't going somewhere else. The whole point of my Phoenix Arise mandala is it's saying that the flower is blossoming, that we're going from a time of a contraction or a closed fist to the opening hand. Now, this means it's not to destroy the infrastructure, it's to begin to use that infrastructure in a different way. My work, I believe, is now a life manifestation, because it's not work to be done. It's, I say, I'm not interested in what you think about my art. I'm interested in what my art makes you think. So it's because this art is about going back to first technology of paint and relationship, answering to the greater dream of the difficulty and anguish of the moment. And from that breath, a story has revealed itself that as one stands within it now, every single part is painted. When we put on 3D glasses, it becomes multidimensional, and yet it is not moving. What moves is when we move the glasses, when we
are
move.
in space and
That's
time.
the opposite of everything being done for us. This is why my work is AI, but it's ancestral intelligence. And in the below, it is archetypal intelligence. And there's an old adage, as above, so below.
So below.
When we return home, the archetypes below, the black and white structure, hold the imagination above, but the floor in between is the domestic, meaning like the body. The legs are connected to the earth, but as we rise up into the belly, into the heart, into the womb.
The soul is connected to the ethers.
Yes, and that then, in this house, allows the midsection to be I love. And then for when we ascend into the hieroglyph of the human soul, into the studio above, into the imagination, into multidimensionality, we are not leaving home. We are discovering that the floor above was really never missing, but it's taken millions of years to manifest symbolically, so that it's not telling us a story that it is not, but it is painted on linoleum, meaning that our mythic disappointment is we're only ordinary, we're linoleum, we're not gold. So I have to become more and more gold. But the alchemy is art, our relationship.
Well, I think essentially what you're talking about is the progression of the chakras.
Yeah.
Like at some point you're entering the 10th gate, which is still a part of you.
And wouldn't the last chakras be personal? I mean, deeply to integrate, like Dath in the Kabbalah, to integrate the purely subjective artistry of your own consciousness. Your home is different than another's. Your character, but they
soul.
are archetypally the same fullness.
Of course.
The genius is...
And they're composed of the same archetypes. But
yeah. See, that's the genius behind us.
of course, this is what so few people understand, but I do think people are catching on.
I do too. I
feel, and I feel at light speed.
Well, that's actually why I feel my work is, when they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, enough talk. Look. And in the same way I feel about if someone doesn't get what I'm saying, because I'm talking about time or multidimensionality, which is not necessarily on the palette with everyone.
It's getting there.
It's getting there. But to me, I say, look at the pictures. See where it takes you, because the theater here, like a library, the librarian can say, oh, I love these books and this is an interesting read, or which is what I do. But the librarian says the library is the key. What the library is offering you all of the books. And also in my library, it's to say, note that you are a book in this library, in the human library. Your spine is different from another, carries a different name. When you look in the mirror, you see yourself and not another. But the genius here is it's creating through location, through intimate space, that the last key is intimate. Meaning, how do we find our way home? How do we find a way to return to the library, not in judgment of the darkness that is in the library, but in the light that is there in spite of the darkness?
It's through the darkness.
Yeah, and that's, I believe, why the last key would be
through the darkness.
Yeah. And if we
That's how you find your way home.
If we can't find it in our human story, we're not going to find it in an alien story or in a tech story. We're just going to go faster and faster, nowhere. Emptiness is not filled, because the emptiness is a vision I had called the human tree. And that on the winter solstice 2011, I asked, why is the human being, why are we in such pain? Why such anguish? And it took me into the inner of a sequoia tree that had been burned out. It was thousands of feet tall. It looked like a chimney. I was looking up and said, this is the human tree. in ancient times, a fire burned out the middle of this tree. And so there's been a hole, but the tree didn't die. It kept growing and growing, reaching and reaching, hoping that this inner emptiness could be filled by reaching more and more toward the stars to get somewhere. And that we reached a point, but there was no further to go. And so it said, is the tree beautiful enough as it is? And I said, of course it is. And then it took me outside of the tree. And it took me to the top of the tree, like looking down the barrel of a gun. And I saw coming from all the different areas of the tree, embers, little sparks floating up into a vortex at the top of the tree where there was a golden brain that was literally being formed from all the embers of this journey of this ancient human tree that had to adapt its life with an inner emptiness that could never be filled until finally the filling of that would be that we would create a brain that was composed not simply of our time but of all time, so that with the human form divine would finally recognize in the tormented beauty of this species that it was not all for naught, that even if we never know why, it's still beautiful. But if we know why and what the purpose is, it's truly divine.
Well, I really do believe we all have a hole in our heart that needs filling, and that's all of us, and that is part of the human condition. And how we do that in our journey to find out how to fill it, it's never going to be filled, but we can be pleased with our journey and how we try to overcome that feeling of emptiness.
Isn't that the poetry of it? You know, that's the interesting longing.
Well, you have to, when you're in pain, romanticize it.
Yeah,
you know, when you're cold, romanticize it.
I think I think the romantic element of life, that it's not all for naught, but that as moods, as breezes, as things sweep upon us, to go with it.
I agree.
Yeah, and maybe that, if we think that, because I feel very strongly now from my own life, my own work, that it's not about more. It's about slowing down.
No, it's definitely not about more.
And recognizing so much of the offering now is about the capacity not to ask the world what's wrong with it, but what do I find essential in it? What would I not miss? What would I hate to leave? Because then we start to regroup around things that matter to us.
Thinking about gratitude. Yeah. Then you're working around gratitude.
And that's why there's a great deal of testing going on right now. What do we pay attention to? It's very much like the dojo is the world.
Right, and that's why we can't pay attention to that which we don't want, because it'll be served to us on a golden platter.
Absolutely. Mental martial art. Know what you are beckoning by what you...
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, well, Leigh... Ooh, how fascinating. I am so glad I finally got you in here, because it wasn't easy.
No.
It wasn't easy.
The conspiring was great against it.
How do our listeners contact you, see your artwork, connect with you?
And, well, that's Leigh J. McCloskey is what I go by, but at LeighMcCloskey.com. I'm Leigh McCloskey on Facebook, which is open to the public. I am also on there as Olandar Foundation for Emerging Renaissance. My home is named Olandar. Mm-hmm. And I created a foundation, but it's not a normal foundation. It's like the foundation for a building. So it's the foundation.
Oh, foundation.
Yeah, Foundation for Emerging Renaissance. And interestingly enough, the acronym, which was not expected, for both the hieroglyph of the human soul and for Olandar Foundation for Emerging Renaissance, is the acronym is THOTHS, which is thoughts or taught when we think of the Egyptian god Thought, which is where tarot comes from, called the Book of Thought or Taught. So and then the acronym for the hieroglyph of the human soul is THOTHS, so it's Thoth's Library. So we have the Book of Thoth below, we have Thoth's Library above, and people can also contact us through, I'm trying to think of Carla McCloskey, which is my wife,
right?
On AOL. We can be contacted. I give you my email, but
you don't have to do. You don't have to do that. But listen, when we first started this podcast, I put my email out there, and it was a mistake.
Yeah, okay. Well, it
was a mistake.
Yeah. Well, we are. But again, Google my name. I have the Olandar publishing, so I am also, my books are available. I highly recommend. It's a great book for discussion, which is Tarot Revisioned. It's of enormous value. I mean,
I'm going to dive into that.
Yeah, it's really, because if we do not perceive that there are layers within what we are dealing with, everything will clump together as one. And this helps us really take apart and say, wait a minute, there are many things that are personal, other things are energetic, and I have to begin to recognize how to navigate these things. So it's an incredibly helpful tool. And to come to the hieroglyph of the human soul, it is to just reach out to me on Facebook or on trying to think what else I've got.
Instagram,
yeah, Leigh
Insta.
McCloskey on Instagram. That's
go.
right. Just go to me on Instagram and reach out to me. And I do set up times. We have events at the house. I always try to, for the last 44 years, and then for the last 9 years, we've had weekend sound baths and presentations and documentaries. So if you're interested, do get in touch. You can contact me on Leigh McCloskey on Instagram, and we'll see. It's a calling out to the curious, as I say.
Well, I am definitely curious.
Good.
I am definitely curious, and I'm so grateful for this hour with you, hour and a half. It was spectacular.
Oh, well, thank you. It's delightful, because I always think that the future depends upon those that say yes rather than yikes. So thanks for saying yes.
I feel more interesting already.
Yeah, that's the theater of it. If it's not good theater, let's stop attending.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you so much.